Actually, this is my responsibility, is to drive culture in our company. But when the entire executive team, we've got 9, they're all doing it, I've now achieved my responsibility to make sure that is being embedded within the executive team. But when I know it works is when the executive team members, managers, all are doing it. And then I got to go back and I got to go talk to that person.
This is so good. This is what we need in our culture and our business.
Double, David. It's the idea that every franchisee, independent of how big they are, should double every 2 years. That means you got to grow 41.6% every year.
Welcome to the Goliath Show. Today, I'm super stoked to introduce you to Scott Abbott, founder and CEO of 5 Star Franchising. I was honored to interview him. He's a well-respected entrepreneur from Utah that led several companies from their very beginnings all the way to successful exits to multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. He co-founded 5 Star Painting, one of America's largest painting franchise systems, which has over 500 locations. Scott gives some incredible insights to business and entrepreneurship, being a founder. Also, his insight on company culture and creating that culture. He doesn't lose executives and employees. So he talks about how he does that. It's really interesting stuff. I'm excited to share more. Enjoy. So Scott, let's just go dive right into it. So tell us about you.
Yeah, happy to do that. So born and raised in a place called Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, just north of North Dakota. That's where Winnie the Pooh was founded. It's actually where 5 Star Painting took its roots. We started the business really in its inception, late 2003. My father helped me get into my first business when I was about 15, 16 years old. At the time, I had a passion for fishing, and I still do. I spent a lot of times in the outdoors. Up in Canada, it's mainly lake fishing, so trolling and spin cast kind of stuff, not the fly fishing you have here in Utah. And learned a lot in those early days. At 16, I had a job, I think, at McDonald's for 6 months, and my dad came to me and said, "Hey, we love fishing. We found these really cool fishing lures that work really well for our area. Why don't we see if we can't convince the manufacturer in the United States to give us an exclusive distribution rights to Canada, and let's start selling these fishing tackle baits to stores in our area." It created a lot of opportunity for me for personal development, because at 16 years old, everything you are at 16, at least I was, lacked a lot of confidence and self-esteem, didn't really know how business even worked, didn't know what I wanted to be. A lot of fear and apprehension around making those first phone calls or walking into the first fishing stores to try and sell something. Really just a complete novice. And I know that you, in your podcast, you mentioned facing different fears and what's held you back and how have you overcome them. I will say it is the moment in time, I can still see it to this day. I'd go downtown to where my dad's office was, and he gave me this little spare office. There was a black phone on a desk and a yellow pages beside it. And he said, "You gotta start calling and finding customers to buy our product." "How do I do that, Dad?" Well, he said, "Simple. You just go to the yellow pages, you turn to fishing tackle, and there's a list of every single fishing tackle store you'd have to call. And on the other end of that ringing noise was somebody I'd have to talk to, a gatekeeper in many cases. And I'd have to try to convince them to let me come see the owner and sell them my fishing tackle." And I remember just the full amount of fear and apprehension and anxiousness around selling something that I've never done before, had no training on how to do it. And it was the first few years sucked, frankly, 16, 17, 18. Every time I would do this, I was scared to death. every time I'd walk into a store where I'd talk and ask for the owner or speak to one of the owners, having to explain that I was the owner of this fishing tackle company called Bass Brothers Fishing Tackle Distributors, and I had a little business card with two little bass dressed like the Blues Brothers with a tie and a hat, and trying to convince these people that I was reputable enough to buy fishing tackle from. And as you would expect with anything, if you give it enough time and enough energy, eventually you make sales, and eventually you get enough success that you pick up another fishing tackle line. And so then I got another couple more stores, and so then I was in Manitoba, then I was in Ontario, and I was in, I at one point had different customers across Canada, from Nova Scotia all the way to BC. And yeah, so like when you say, who's Scott Abbott, I'd say when it comes to entrepreneurship, those are the defining moments of my entire life, where I became comfortable with being uncomfortable. I became comfortable doing things that were, for me, very difficult, or I was unqualified, frankly. You would never hire me to sell anything at age 16. But I did it and found success in it. And it gave me some confidence that helped me propel to the next stage in my life. And I'll keep going until you tell me to stop, David. But at age 20, I decided to serve a mission for my faith. I live here in Utah now. At the time was in Winnipeg. And it's for the Mormon or LDS faith, which some people may know. And what's distinct about the faith is you serve a mission, it's 2 years, and you pay your own way. You save up your own money to go for 2 years. Someplace they tell you where you're going to go. You don't know where that's going to be. And you go and serve people for a couple of years, and including knocking doors with a little black name tag and a white shirt, right? And sales in a religious fashion. And I was called, as they call it, to Brussels, Belgium, and northern France. Now taking that 16 to 20-year-old time of life where I became more comfortable with communicating, interacting with people I didn't know, coming up to people I had never talked to before, and presenting and offering some service or a product, to now doing that in a religious fashion in a language I did not know. So I had to learn French. And then meeting people constantly that I'd never met before, everywhere, for 2 years. And then coming home from all of that. And I'm so thankful for those experiences, because they were very different. One, I got paid to do it. The other one, I paid to do it. Right? And it fed something in me around a few things. One is I love people now. I love meeting new people. And I'm very comfortable with meeting new people, whereas at one point in my life I was terrified. A very high anxiousness level around that kind of... If you were to say, Scott, what would be the most terrifying thing you could ever think of, I would tell you, walking into a room of people I don't know. That would be the most terrifying thing I could ever have done. Today I feel very comfortable, and I can credit that to those experiences, right? Which became really important because it started to feed where I'm going with my career in franchising at some point. And the other thing is this deep desire to help people and to help them accomplish their goals in life. And franchising is, in my opinion, is exactly that. We're helping small business America build their American dream and do so with a higher probability of success because we have a system they can rely on that can help them achieve their goals. And I take great pleasure. It's actually, the mission of our company is to empower our franchise partners and home service companies. That is why we exist as an organization. It's why all of our employees get up every day and come to work. Mm-hmm. And that is actually a function of, if you would ask me, Scott, what's your personal mission? I'd say that's it. Like I take so much enjoyment when I'm coaching sports or developing youth in my faith, or working with my own kids or other people's kids or business owners. I take great pleasure in helping people achieve their own personal goals, and see. I think I've developed over the years this ability to see people's potential and what they can become, and I believe in people through and through, and so I really work on how to help them become who they can become. Yeah, if you were to ask, when you ask that question, who's Scott Abbott, I'd say, going back to my roots, that's a big part of who I am. It taught me about entrepreneurship. It gave me a lot of confidence and a really strong desire, frankly, to be self-employed and build something that I've been creating from the beginning.
Great. So what brought you into franchising? Like, how did you find it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of my co-founders, Chad Jones, I'm still my business partner today. He's the COO of 5 Star Franchising. You've met Chad, I'm sure, at different functions over the years.
Wonderful man.
The guy's amazing. We've been best friends since 11, 12 years old. And we grew up together in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And as the story goes, we were at a wedding, mutual friend's wedding. He had a basement renovation company and a little painting company in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. They'd moved there from Winnipeg. And it struggled because every time they tried expanding, they'd stand up a location and they would hire an employee to run that location. And ultimately, those businesses failed. So at this wedding, we were chatting, and he said to me, he's describing the challenges he's facing and how it's not working. And I was at the time working in an accounting firm. It was the first time I had a job, a real job, where I got paid a real salary and I would wear a real suit and I had a real commute and all the things I hated about life. And suits and commutes, the two things I hate. And driving to work every day for 45 minutes in rush hour and just thinking about how I can't stand wasting my time driving and I'm uncomfortable in this suit and working in an accounting firm that is a great company but just was too stuffy and not innovative. And I said to Chad, I said, I need to find something more entrepreneurial. Why don't we spend some time working on this together? And in the back of my mind, I had this moment my dad had shared with me, how he sold franchises for a company called Koya Japan. And I remember him telling me about how people would pay for the rights to buy a territory, and then they would operate it and pay a royalty. And conceptually, I thought, if I could convince someone to buy a franchise, a painting franchise, I would solve the problem around having skin in the game and ownership, so that they would have enough. Instead of us paying them 10 or 15% of revenue, they'd get 95% of the revenue, and we get 5%. So we take a smaller piece of the pie, but they would have so much more motivation to achieve something that, like, mentally, I thought, that's how you had to do it, Chad. We got to franchise the painting company. At the time, his business was called 5 Star Enterprises. We created 2 companies in 2004, or maybe in 2003, 2004, 2003. One was called Paintworks, and I literally copied Serpro in every respect you can imagine. Like, I took their ads, I copied their website. I actually have a cease and desist letter from them somewhere, because I took their exact website, just copied it, and I put Paintworks on it, and knew its own with a different logo. Content was the same, brand promise was the same. I just did their business. And then I had a Yellow Pages ads that was like, just look at the Yellow Page ad, do the same thing, and I put a call tracking number on it. And then beside that same quarter page ad in the Yellow Pages, I put 5 Star Painting, and I had our style of how we would attract customers, our approach to attracting customers, which led with $99 a room. That would be your one coat. It was $165 for 2 coats, $265 for a color change. We told people up front what it would cost to get their room done. And for 1 year, I ran these companies side by side, and Paintworks against 5 Star Painting, and 5 Star Painting had about a 4-to-1 call ratio over the Paintworks ad. And so I knew I had something. As I looked at that, I went, what? This is working. We're getting a lot of calls. We did a lot of lawn signs at the time. And
that is the most extreme A/B testing I have ever heard.
Yeah, it was expensive. For a full year, we ran these 2 companies separately. My brother-in-law actually was the one that ran, Jordan Gross, my wife's brother, was the one that ran the 5 Star Painting location. He went on to become a franchisee and employee of the company, and was a great contributor to the success of our business. What was interesting is, so we started franchising it. We found an attorney. At the time it was called UFOCs, Uniform Franchise Offering Circulars, and so we started getting this stuff put together. I enrolled in the executive MBA program here in Utah at the same time as officially launching the franchise concept. We had these lawn signs out all over the place advertising our service, and a guy named Alan Turner saw the lawn sign, went to our website. He was looking at buying a CertaPro franchise. He said, I like your business and your style better than CertaPro. Would you sell me a franchise? So our very first franchisee, back then we created something called the first mover advantage. You get $10,000 off the first territory in any given market, then $40,000 for each additional one. He paid the full price of $30,000. We closed him in August of 2005, just as I was moving down here to the States. And he's 6'4", kung fu, black belt guy, kindest man, and our first franchisee, and was a great franchisee for years. As we moved down to the States, we opened up in Salt Lake City. One of our partners moved to Vegas, had a location there. Eventually Chad moved down from Edmonton in 2007 to Utah. The business was on its way, but we were young, and really we'd never franchised anything. I wouldn't have bet on us. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just guys running a painting company that were franchising it, and in 2005 the internet was just making the move, and we were pretty savvy. All of our franchise sales for the next 7 years came from internet marketing, and we would sell between 10 and 30 a year off of internet marketing. No brokers ever, not one broker sale. And we were just really good at it. We were really good at generating leads from internet marketing. But what was interesting is in 2006, halfway through my MBA, they had this business plan competition at BYU, and I entered it with our 5-star painting concept. And one of the judges of the competition, a guy named Greg Warnock, he had a fund named Gazelle, and now he's one of the largest venture capitalists here in Utah. A fund called Mercado and Prelude, and on. What's funny is now I'm an investor in 5 of his funds. The tables have turned. I'm now investing in him versus him investing in me. But he was a judge at one of these competitions. He saw what we were doing, and he just said, Scott, I don't really know what you're doing in painting or franchising, but I really like you and your team, and I want to make an investment in you guys. So we accepted some of his capital. He came onto our board, and we had this guy who was brilliant, and he had so much to offer from other company experiences that we would leverage around systematizing customer experiences and texting and internet marketing, that we would leverage all that at our painting business. And it was the genesis of ProNexus, which is our customer experience solution. We have a call center, lead gen arm, and a technology arm. And that business in itself has thrived as it's mastered the art of engaging with customers on behalf of franchisees in the home services industry. And all that led to just a series of events that ultimately we became one of the fastest growing companies here in Utah for years. 4 or 5 years in a row we were in the top 50, and until we sold the business. And so it was, that's kind of how 5-star painting happened, how we fell into it. And the model speaks for itself, David. Franchising is one where even franchisors who aren't good at operating can have very successful franchisees, because they just, franchisees want to be successful, and they're going to do it in spite of you in many cases.
Right.
If you can actually keep that mentality, but actually be a good franchisor and deliver a lot of value, that's where you can unlock, I think, some pretty impressive growth.
I noticed about your brand, when I owned Housemaster Home Inspections, I'm almost positive it was more than double the average of revenues per location. And I know that you were doing the same thing. Can you elaborate how you did it? Because most franchise systems, I think, are very poor on getting lead flow for the franchisees. Most. Yeah,
I can say that we have a value system. It's called DRIVE. And the D of DRIVE stands for being driven. And the subtext to all that is we are obsessed about results, highly competitive, and we hold each other accountable, and we are numbers driven. And for me, it was just really obvious. In home, the shift from Yellow Pages to digital marketing created this huge opportunity for us to just specialize in lead acquisition, on behalf of franchisees, and doing it in such a way that the ROI we were producing for franchisees at painting was ridiculous. Our average cost per lead was around $30. The 70% of all the leads our franchisees, 70 to 80% of all the leads our franchisees got came from programs that we would run for them. Their SEO, their PPC, and then it's now become social and lead gen partners. And we obsessed about this so much. Like, we were constantly, how do we drive the cost of lead per lead down? How do we increase the volumes? How do we use technology to automate and use systems to make this so that ultimately we're driving the highest conversion rates possible? How do we create the feedback loop to know what's working, what's not working, so that ultimately the ROI for these franchisees is incredible? And consistently delivering programs that they would be at about a 15x per dollar spend. And doing that for years. And it's not just a lead gen front, but, and I'll just share this with you because it gives you a sense of who we are. The I in Drive stands for innovation. And it's about innovating new and better ways of doing things in a category that's pretty sleepy in general, right? Most home service companies don't have the resources we have to innovate in a way that can be really game-changing. But I'll give you an example of this. In 2009 or 8, Home Advisor came on the scene. Back then it was called Service Magic. And so I had these franchisees come to us and they'd say, hey, I'm buying leads from this partner that just generates leads in the marketplace, and they're crappy leads. And I learned more about how do you find these leads. They went through the program, how these leads are sold to three different service providers. And we would look at it and we go, you'd buy a lead and you'd get about a 20% hit rate. Whereas our digital marketing efforts would be like 90% of all the leads we generated online resulted in an estimate. And of that 90%, between 30 and 50% would close depending on the salesperson's ability. So really high returns. Whereas Service Magic or Home Advisor now, 20% of the leads they bought resulted in an estimate, and only 20% of those would be closed into a job because it's more competitive. So the math just didn't work out. So as we looked at this, we said, how do we innovate this category so that we can drive value for franchisees? And we created this system. We called it the ACS, the Automated Contact System. We started masking our outbound numbers to match the local number. It's not, back then it was game changing. Today everyone does it. Right. But it was game changing back then. So when we called someone, it wasn't a 100 line, it was their local area code number. And when the call came in, we had dialers that would call within 30 seconds of the lead coming in. And we would follow up in 5 minutes, in 1 hour, in 4 hours, in 8 hours. And this was all automated. And we did it in a way where it wasn't a robo-dial where we called 5 at once. We would dial our agent internally, pop the customer's information, and then dial the customer so we were ready every time. And then we'd leave messages and so forth. This sequence resulted in a conversion rate from going from 20% to almost 60%.
Wow.
So a 3x just by introducing technology and automation. What that meant was everyone else was burning money on Service Magic and Home Advisor. And we were making money, a lot of money. You'd spend $1 and you'd make $8, $9, or $10 on Service Magic, which is unheard of. Which meant our franchisees had unlimited potential. We could do all of our programs and through this automation take really crappy quality leads and turn them into revenue for them. You know, it was that obsession. That's just in our DNA. You come back to the original story, right? Like, what do? We started 2 companies and ran them for a full year, and we would track them. We were so scientific to know ultimately what worked. That's just in our DNA. We are willing to do things and spend money in ways to find out what's the best way of getting leads, or turning leads into appointments, or turning appointments into jobs, or what happens when you introduce financing. What happens with a certain sales program? How does it adjust your conversion rates? And you're just constantly dialing it in and dialing it in and dialing it in to where the franchisees, incredible success, growth rates, and I'm really proud of what we built at 5 Star Painting. We still, to this day, support 5 Star Painting through our software. that we developed, as well as Pronexus, and in some cases do some marketing for some of the franchisees still to this day. It's been 8 years since I sold the company in 2015. The business is 4 times larger today than what it was when we sold it. And so it's that's a tribute to Neighborly and their executive team members as well. Clearly, they've done amazing work. But we're part of that. And I've been very proud of, once again, coming back to our mission, we're about empowering franchisees' success in the home services industry. So we really just, it's who we are. We just love finding better ways and being obsessed about it, to where now we own 6 brands in home services today. We'll acquire 3 more in the next 12 months. I hope to announce 1 in the next few months that's under contract. And that obsession around creating value for franchisees and delivering value for franchisees is working. We're seeing, today we call it double, David. It's the idea that every franchisee, independent of how big they are, should double every 2 years. That means you've got to grow 41.6% every year. And I can tell you our largest franchisee has been growing at greater than 40% a year for the last 5 years straight. He's doing almost $10 million a year right now. When he was $2 million, you'd say, well, it's really hard to double your business at $2 million because you're so big. He went to 5. When you're at $5 million, you can't keep doubling. That's impossible. Well, he's now at 10. He didn't buy more territories. He didn't double because he bought a bunch more territories. He doubled because he just went deep and grew his business aggressively. Today, over 550 owners, 250 of them are on track to double their business every 2 years. Over half of our owners, I guess a little less than half than our owners, are on that pace of double. And our whole organization focuses on that. How do we help our owners double their business every 2 years? If we do that, then we have amazing validation, franchisees are really happy, franchise development spins up in a way that is incredible. We placed 28 or 29 locations in April alone. Wow. So you look at, what does that do? If you obsess about results for franchisees, and you obsess about helping them truly and authentically be successful, that can't help but spin up the franchise development engine. So now our entire executive franchise sales team, when they're up there spreading the message of what we can do at 5 Star, that resonates because the validation's there.
Incredible, Scott, and it's more fascinating getting to know it more in detail and learning it on a deeper level. How something's happened with franchising that there's a lot of fear, and the fear is liability on the franchisor side.
Yeah.
Centralizing programs, centralizing call centers, centralizing lead flow. What would you say to an industry that is so full of fear? Because I'm talking to these guys almost daily, Scott,
Sure.
and there's just so much fear going on with that. But yet, what you're doing, and by centralizing what you're doing, because I believe in what you're doing, I believe in that same thought process, and that's one of the reasons why my companies were doing double, triple the numbers of what was in the industry. And everyone was like fascinated with it, but I was like, we're doing a lot of the work, not just for them, but with them. And so we were working together to do that. And sometimes, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but I really just want to know your feelings on that fear issue of liability.
Yeah. Franchising every business has liability. Every business has risks. I mean, if, for example, if right now you're in a law firm and you are learning about what ChatGPT can do to your business, let's say you are in a content creation business, what's happening to ad agencies right now, right? Where are headcount reductions happening at Facebook and all these other businesses? It's because there's innovation happening constantly, and there's reason to be fearful in every industry. We're not blind to it. We don't ignore the challenges that can come from taking on too much, for example, and having joint employer liability, or the risks that come from franchisees doing things in a way that creates liability for the franchisor. These are all realities of business. You can't escape it, right? But how much time do I spend on that stuff? Not a lot, I'll be honest with you, David. It always comes down to the same thing. Are you creating value?
Right.
Am I creating value for my consumer, the end user of my services? Am I doing that in a way where my net promoter score and how they rate my businesses is a 4.8, 5-star or higher on a 5-star scale, which is something we do measure closely and we do really watch. Are we adding value there? Am I adding value to the franchisees? I've had thousands, a little over 1,000 franchisees now, agreements. And in all my 19 years, I have never had a lawsuit with a franchisee. Not once. I've never been sued, and I've never sued.
You're obsessed with their success. And that's
if you're adding value, right? And this doesn't mean that we don't have failures, David. I'd say about 3% to 4% of our franchise system transitions is the word I'll use. In some cases, it means failure. Some of those don't work out. Sometimes life events happen. Sometimes they retire and they sell their business. It doesn't mean we don't have those things happen, but we still show so much respect to the franchisee in the process that we want to solve to the best of our ability the final outcome for the owner. If I'm adding enough value back to the franchisees, then these liabilities become minimized, right? I'm sure you've heard those expressions before, right? There's two wolves in your mind or something like that, and the one you feed is the one that grows. Do you want to feed the wolf of fear, or do you want to feed the wolf of courage? I don't know, whatever the expression is, the story goes, the ancient Native American story. And I don't dwell or spend much time on it. We have a full-time attorney who sits he's our chief of legal, he's got a legal team in our organization who, I'm sure he's worrying about those things, and he's making sure the FDDs are done correctly and that we're following all the rules to minimize our risk. We have insurance policies to make sure that if something goes wrong, that we ultimately are covered, and cybersecurity and all that stuff, which we've had breaches. We've had situations where a franchisee was breached and it's caused some challenges, and we need to rely on insurance to take care of those things. So it doesn't mean you operate without those things in mind, but they become rounding errors. They're not game-changing liabilities that will destroy our industry. We all adapt. If things change and they change legally, we can adapt. We always will adapt. And if we keep adding value back to people's lives, then we'll keep growing.
You personally, if people really knew you, what would they be surprised most about you?
If people really knew me, what would they be the most surprised by? It's a really good question. I don't know if I would hope that they wouldn't be surprised by anything, David. One of our values in the word drive is real. And the description of real means authenticity. And I have a family value statement as well. It sits on my wall just down the hall. And one of those values in our family is we live authentically. There's no pretense. There is no other version of me. If you walk into my office and you were to talk to me in the office, and if you're walking to my home and see me operate my family, or walk into the pitch and see me play soccer, you get what there is. That's it. And so I would hope that I wouldn't surprise anyone. There's unique things around me that maybe people don't know. Like I play the flute, and I play guitar, and I play drums, and I spend a lot of time snowboarding backcountry, and I do a lot of fishing and wake surfing and surfing, and so I'm a very active lifestyle. I do a lot of mountain biking. I'm training for a marathon right now. These shouldn't be surprises, but if you didn't know me, you'd go, oh, I do cold showers. I'm a Wim Hofer. I do breathing exercise every morning. I try to be a deeply spiritual man. I spend time meditating, and I read a lot. I spend a lot of time learning and feeding that curiosity that I have. And my reading varies. The last book I just read was a book called Sapiens, which is, if you read that book, it is very cerebral, and it's very about the history of mankind and how we've all gotten to where we are today and the evolution of mankind. But at the same time, I'm very spiritual, and I go to church every Sunday, right? I don't think some of those things might come as surprises to people. I don't know, because they don't know me. But yeah, there's no question that the culture that we have in our family and in our business is one of authenticity.
What is since we're called Goliath, what is something that was a Goliath that you had to overcome, an adversity that you had to overcome in your life? And I don't care if it's business or personal. I'd like to know more about you on that level.
Sure. Yeah, I can think of a couple things that adversities. I've had my moments, right? I had a ruptured disc in my back from snowboarding. There's a flip that went wrong. 1.5. It was not a full rotation. It's a 1.5 rotation that didn't work out too well. And I'm celiac as well. So I suffer from an autoimmune disease. That means I can't eat gluten. So I'm that high maintenance guy at every restaurant asking for gluten-free, which I can't stand. It drives me crazy, but it's out of necessity. If I don't, I get sick. Arthritis has been a problem for me, which is actually a function of celiac disease. So there's little things like that are physical challenges or ailments that place into question my mortality and has me thinking a little bit deeper around my health. And I'm very careful about what I eat now and the exercise I do to make sure that I stay fit for as long as I can. I'm running a marathon. I hate running. I hate running with a passion. But speaking to who I am, my daughter asked me to do it. And if my kids ask me to do anything that is physically active, I have a promise I've made to them. You name it. What mountain do you want to climb? What run do you want to do? What game do you want to play? I'm up for it. And so here I am training for a marathon. It'll be my first marathon, hopefully my last, that I run here in a few weeks. And so I run a half marathon every weekend, and it's been brutal. If you put a soccer ball in front of me, I could do it all day long. The fact I'm just out there pounding away in the pavement is difficult. But I'll go to like two, I will call them defining moments that I did not realize how defining they were until I overcame those moments. And in our Mormon faith or LDS faith, it is not uncommon to be asked to speak on Sundays. So coming back to the earlier version of me, the amount of anxiety I had around public speaking was maybe for some people common, I don't know. But for me, it was absolutely terrifying. I can remember the very first time I had to speak in public. You go up in front of the congregation, and I was shaking so bad. Like my legs were shaking so bad, my hands were shaking so bad that I had to stabilize myself by holding onto the lectern and just trying to stop myself from falling over. And like the microphone is shaking and it's vibrating, and I'm trying to just get through a simple 5-minute talk. And absolutely just terrifying. I distinctly can remember that. And so for me, I've become this kind of person that faces my fears, and I've gotten better at this. If there's something that I find fearful, I now lean in. Before, I would lean out. Avoid the things that make me feel uncomfortable. But the reason why that was so important is I had no idea how important public speaking, being comfortable with speaking in public, would be to my career choice. So as the CEO of 5-Star Franchising, like just yesterday, I had to do a meet the team day, and I'm constantly having to speak to my team members in town halls monthly, in quarterly sessions, in annual conventions, brand conventions, podcasts. I am talking all the time. Instead of being a dad where I'm in the family, operating the business constantly, I'm more like a grandfather now. I'm telling stories, right? That change or that shift of responsibility is making me lean more and more on my ability to communicate. And at 15 and 14, the most terrifying thing I could ever think of. And now, today, being very comfortable with it, I lean in. It's something that I take a lot of time and prepare for things. I make sure that I have everything ready, and I embrace that responsibility. And it's helped our company thrive, because recognizing it's my responsibility has allowed other people to step up into the more dad roles, where they're running the family. They're actually day-to-day doing the things that have to get done. And I'm all about empowering those people, and now going from having done it myself to now helping the next generation operate this business in a way where I am now, once again, no one joins my company unless I interview them. Not one person will be hired without me talking to them. It's my policy. I'm looking for culture fit.
I love it.
So today, I'm in the middle of this final interview for this candidate. She's already gone through 2 interviews. And as I'm talking with her, I can tell. And so I go into story mode about how I live that value, or my partner lived that value. And she's like, why are you telling me this story? And I'm letting her know. It's because I can tell. This is something you're going to struggle with. You're conflict avoidant. You're worried about talking back or speaking up to your superiors. And in our industry, in my business, I need you to feel comfortable and know that in my organization, you can speak up. You can be authentic, and you can push back against things that don't make sense. That transition has been transformational around that moment in time where I conquered that first demon, or Goliath, or whatever you want to call it, which is really myself, the fear of public speaking. And if I were to go dig deeper into that, David, the second thing that I think that has helped me become a better leader is the reason why I don't like public speaking. It's just like when you learn a new language. I speak French and Spanish a little bit. And it's very uncomfortable because when you speak with another language, people catch your mistakes and they'll correct you. And my fear of being wrong, my fear of making mistakes publicly, got in the way of my learning. And so one of our family values on our wall, it's learn, is the very first one. And next to it says make mistakes. Okay? And many of them are afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid to be wrong. And I have now been intentionally embracing that. This is how we learn. We need to all be comfortable with the fact that if you make mistakes, you turn that into a learning opportunity. And so my organization has to have that same mentality and culture, right? People make mistakes that cost our company money all the time. Do I punish them? Or do we learn from that? Do we look at that mistake and we use it to grow the organization? So I'd say those 2 things are Goliaths or challenges or maybe personal weaknesses that I've found ways to overcome that to help us grow the business and be successful.
That's great points. Facing your fears, that's something that I struggle with as well. In life, when we're young, everything's yes. Like when you were babies, to us, anything is possible. And as we grow and go through life challenges, we get constantly told no from our parents. And then we get told no in school. And then we get told no in our job life. And all these no's, it knocks you down. And whether you've had family, parental, marital, financial issues, it breaks people down as time goes on. One of the reasons I call this Goliath is because my father, my late mother, they would always call me Job because of all of these things that I've gone through in my life. And it was probably the biggest challenge to be able to overcome myself. Not so much other people, but myself, like the fears that were coming in, the adversity that I was constantly getting hammered by. I wanted to be able to bring hope to people that they can do anything if they really put their heart and soul into it. And Scott, I've always had a massive amount of respect for you because of who you are. I definitely would have said first, authenticity. I read this book and it was about this individual who's an executive and who's taking on a new job. And
Leadership and Self-Deception.
Yes, Leadership and Self-Deception. I've probably read it 10 times but great book, right? And something about that book really hit me hard too, because they were all coming in with what your mindset is. You would be an amazing coach to help companies to just do basic things. Like, for instance, being a supplier in franchising, I have had, just personally, just on the hierarchy executive search side, just that alone, we have helped over 1,300 of the 3,400 franchisors. So we have placed well over 1,000 executives and directors in the business at the franchisor level. So I have a very intimate relationship with these companies. I'm probably 80%, even closer to 90%, that are dysfunctional at the manager, owner level down the management level, because everyone is like that woman that is afraid to be honest and open. I hired a veteran from the industry, a keynote speaker at all the conventions. I hired him as my president of my brands. And he was so afraid. The first day he started, I said, I want you to be honest with me. Tell me how it is. I don't want you to have to feel like you're worried about that. I had to coach him for a year and a half on a consistent basis, that because it was so ingrained in his persona. It's hard to teach that.
The reality is that they've lived in a culture and an environment where pushing back or saying how they really think is not rewarded.
Right.
In fact, it detracts from their ability to move up in a company. Then they've learned to protect themselves and play the game. And so, even though you tell people this stuff, until they've seen it, and then until they've seen other people in the organization live that culture or live that value, and until they've seen that not have a negative impact on them and their career, they're going to be worried about it. And they justifiably should be, because they have lived in environments where it's political. They don't truly live the values of the organization. It's just, how do we be different? How do we make sure we get people on that same page? That's the struggle of every executive.
What is the main thing that we need to do as a company and as a culture to do that?
You have to reward it. You feed what you want to work, and you starve what you don't want to work. You have to be intentional about it. You have to.
How do you reward that? How do you?
Yeah. So to reward, you literally do reward it every quarter. I have a town hall with all of our executives, and I list every person that's lived the values that's been nominated, and I tell their story of what they've done that has lived that value, and I give them a reward. You've lived the value, and this is how you did it, and I give them some money or a gift card or something. And I do that every single quarter. And in addition to that, every week in our L10 meeting, we talk about how people live the values. And every month in our monthly update, we talk about how people live the values. And so if you're not, people won't hear it unless you say it 8 to 10 times. If it's just on the wall of your organization, you're not talking about it, it means nothing. If you talk about it all the time, and you reward people for doing it all the time. It was this last quarterly meeting, town hall we held, I had so much fun. We had, 150 employees all dialed in. The screen's full of all these people that work in our organization. And I'm going through the values and how people live those values. I'm calling people out. And I'm watching in the chat all the hundreds of responses of people clapping and cheering their executive team members or managers have lived the values in some way and saying congratulations. Okay, wow. That's it. Now we're getting there. People know we live it. They know it's important. I'm rewarding it. I'm feeding it because I want it to work. And I took so much personal joy and satisfaction in this, because the moment it doesn't happen from me, this is where it's working. It's my job. This is my job as a CEO. This is my responsibility, is to drive culture in our company. But when the entire executive team, we've got 9, they're all doing it, I've now achieved my responsibility to make sure that is being embedded within the executive team. But when I know it works is when the executive team members, managers, all are doing it. And I test this because I do the last interview for every hire. So at every single last interview, I ask the candidate to tell me what our values are of the organization. And if they can't tell me what our values are, that means who has interviewed them didn't know the values, or didn't bring it, or didn't highlight it. And then I know it's not happening. So I'm actually, when I do, if it ever happens where I do an interview and someone cannot come on that call and tell me what Drive stands for and list them and talk about them as they are and how important they are, then I know whoever interviewed them doesn't get it.
Man,
and then I got to go back and I got to go talk to that person.
This is so good. Scott, this is amazing. This is what we need in our culture, in our business culture, in our families. I love the values. So basically, to overview, if we're talking to a young and up and coming emerging brand founders and executives, we say, make sure you have your values defined up everywhere. Everyone's memorized it. That's one of the things that I loved about Dina Dwyer with Neighborly, is that they had these they focused on their values on every call. So you have the values and you instill that in the team. You have quarterly reviews, you said. You do
quarterly town halls. Where I broadcast to the entire company every quarter.
Got it. And then you reward on that call.
Yep.
Okay. So you
are right. And we do quarterly reviews. I shouldn't say quarterly. It's usually semi-annual reviews as well. Okay. We hire and fire and reward based on the values.
Okay. And focusing as the CEO, founder, you are focusing on driving those values into the system and making sure that it stays on top. This is a great overview of what I would like to promote this podcast, because I think that is the core value of what we need to do, right? The issue that I see, and this is a whole nother hour episode, is there is this core problem that we have in business that is insecurity. And insecurity leads to pride, and pride leads to lying. And it's based out of fear. You must have a really low attrition at your company as far as employees.
It's pretty rare that someone quits. I'm trying to think the last time someone quit. Once, I think I've got one employee in my mind right now that has left in the last 18 months. We have let go people, right? And so if people don't fit the value, once again, if you're hiring, firing, and rewarding on your value system, then there are only people who don't live the value. At some point in every entrepreneur's career or CEO's career, they have to come comfortable with the fact that you're driving the bus and you get to shift the seats. But you can also stop the bus and say, you just don't belong on this bus. It doesn't mean that this person doesn't belong on another bus, right? It just means that where you're heading isn't a fit or a match for where this person wants to go. And so asking people to get off the bus, and in doing so respectfully, because we put people first in our organization, I've made calls. I've helped people find jobs after. They're great people in many cases. They just weren't the right fit for us. And so that doesn't mean they're not a fit somewhere else. We can help them transition. And in some cases, some of these employees that we've let go have thrived in the new environment with the new people they're working with and the new mission. They just weren't a fit for where we were going. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it reduces friction, right? If you've got people on the bus complaining about where you're going, that's a long ride. Because where we're going this is not like a 2-mile road trip. This is cross country. We're doing the tour, and we want to make sure that people are on the bus that really enjoy where we're going.
Why don't we end this podcast with this question? What piece of advice would you give to up and coming founders that would make a huge impact on their lives that's helped you?
I started to synthesize my personal purpose with the business purpose and being okay with that. Like,
elaborate.
Once again, the mission, look at the mission of my organization. It's about empowering franchise partners' success in the home services industry. That is who I am. I started to come to the conclusion and the realization that my purpose and why I exist is the same at home and at work and in my community. I don't come home from work and then I put a different hat on. Now I'm dad. And now as dad, I operate and think differently. I now am integrating how I operate in any role or responsibility, and I am comfortable with them all being the same version of Scott Abbott. And I think when that has happened, and I've come, and it's taken me, I'm 48. It's only been the last 18 months. I've actually come to this conclusion of who I want to be and my purpose in this life. It takes some time to sort that out. Being comfortable with that is also important. As a founder, and you're just getting going, this is a journey you're embarking on, and you don't have to have all the answers today, right? You're going to have experiences that are going to help create and mold who you want to be. And becoming the best version of yourself needs to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to make mistakes, you're going to get it wrong, and as long as you're learning from those things, you're going to start creating who you want to be. And when you do that, you're going to find incredible success. And success is where there's financial success. And I don't know if financial success will follow every founder. In some cases, I just had a meeting with someone recently. And so I'm in this meeting with this individual, and he tells me that he was one of the larger developers ever in Utah. And he starts going through all the projects he had. Very successful, large projects. And he almost went bankrupt in 2008. So here's a really high caliber individual, tons of experience, lots of capital, went to almost zero. Not because he did anything wrong. It's because the environment, the economy, external forces had a big impact on his business. So when I say success, I don't want to I'm not making promises around financial success. But I will make promises around personal success. And as I define it, which is fulfilling who you can be in this life, and being the best version of that. If you follow those rules, the money will follow. Like eventually, it's going to come, right? It almost always does. If you put your head down long enough, work long enough, and do enough, you apply yourself in a way that makes sense. But to get to real success, don't take shortcuts. Franchising is full of, I shouldn't say full. I don't want to say that. But I will say there are those who operate kind of the black arts of franchising. I call them where the franchise fee is paying for their car, and they're shortcutting it. They're trying to get to that financial success so quickly, so they can show everyone that they've been successful. They neglect the franchise system. Build a foundation that's really strong. Invest in this foundation that's really strong that can support and create a brand that can be successful for generations. Don't think just about your lifetime. Build a company that will last 100 years and will be delivering value for employees. I said in my interview today, I think there's about 4,000 people that work in our organization amongst 5-star franchisees and their employees. We're feeding 4,000 families. I take great pride in that. We're building something that's creating value for generations. And to do that, you've got to be so committed to that foundation in the early stages and be comfortable with the fact that, once again, you're going to make mistakes. Things aren't going to always go right. Cash flow is probably going to be a problem. It's normal. You'll figure it out.
This has been amazing. I'm so appreciative of you being on the podcast today, and I'm sure the listeners are going to love this.
Thank you, Dave. This has been a pleasure. I always enjoyed talking franchising, founders, entrepreneurship. I don't get tired of it. It's always enjoyable. So thank you for the opportunity.